Hello, hello. I hope everybody's doing well. It's been ages since I've streamed, and I was trying to figure out the other day why, because I don't know, time just seems to disappear into the ether um, at the moment, this summer anyway. I don't know, I think it's because I'm trying to actually enjoy the summer, so I tend to get burnt out a little bit at this time. I think at this time of year, and then in January, I get a little bit burnt out. January, because January I've worked really hard over winter when the weather's shit and I don't want to leave the house anyway. And now because I'm trying to leave the house and work. Um, so yeah, apologies for the lack of streaming and the lack of updates as well. The other issue I've had, and I thought we'd start with the dollar here, is that uh, the confluence of the market has been quite off. The BTC Korea pair has kind of been doing not what I expect to have the confluence. I like to have the confluence across the two, and the BTC Korea pair hasn't really been doing kind of what I expect. So it's been a little bit challenging when I'm looking for confluence for the bigger moves and things like that. But anyway, let's just start with the dollar because that's kind of frames also the differences that I'll get to in a minute. But so at the moment, so for a long time, I've been bullish on the dollar, wanting to be bullish because it hit annual demand. And obviously the annual demand is massive. It's this whole massive grey box down here with the various brown ones inside and monthlies. And so we had this tap on it back in July. And then it went back up into supply as you'd expect. And there's 2 week supplies up there that it tested. And then it came back down for the retest. And I think this was FOMC and the interest rate change back on the 17th of September, which then got a swing failure of the low and then finally started this bigger move up. So yeah, I have been bullish on this for a while, but obviously it still needs to kind of break some local structure to the upside. It's still kind of really in a local downtrend, but it has taken out that low now. So at least we expect to take out this high. Then these levels up here are kind of where it potentially might get some decent resistance. There's 3 month supply and then 6 month supply. And again, similar to the annual, these are also massive zones. It's had the big drop down here and left these big imbalances throughout, plus a couple of gaps in there. So sorry, let me just silence my phone. Because otherwise it might just continue beeping at me the entire time, which will be intensely irritating. Okay, done. Yeah, so obviously this can go much higher into the 6 month supply if it wants to. But at the moment, anyway, very early days on this. So we did make a 2 week supply, I think, last week. Hasn't tested that. Oh no, it did test that and pumped off it. Oh yes, and did leave a gap on Monday morning, and that's kind of always a bit of a challenge as well, because with gaps you don't know if they're going to come back for them or not. So it's down to the bottom of this red candle here, and then the Monday candle opened at the 2 week level 97.97, and then pumped from there. So it's left this gap in here, and that's mainly because the dollar yen pair, and all the yen pairs, or the yen died, so therefore all the yen pairs pumped quite hard and left huge gaps because there was a prime minister or presidency change, I forget which. So yeah, so whether it's going to come back down and test here, unsure. Like it doesn't have, like we typically like it to come back and fill gaps, but I would rather it had done sooner. And as I said, there's gaps up here and I think a very small one up there that weren't completely filled previously, so it doesn't have to for a while. So you can't necessarily be certain that gaps are going to get filled the instant they are created. And I feel like there were a lot. I feel like this pump left quite a lot of gaps, just small ones all the way up. Yeah, actually I can see one in there. So again, it went quite a long way before it came back to fill that gap. So yeah, anyway, this is part of the reason, because of the strength of this. At the times it's had strength, it's had quite strong days. Like even if the whole trend isn't that strong, it's had a few strong days here and there, and that then causes a disparity between the Bitcoin US dollar pair and the Bitcoin Korea pair. Now, if Bitcoin's very independent and doing its own thing, it doesn't really matter. The structures will be slightly different, but not dramatically so. But when Bitcoin's going basically sideways, which is, it feels like it's strong, but really it's been sideways for a month or two now, then you start to see these big differences. Then on the flip side, I didn't refresh this page before. Okay, so we have had big drops now finally on the indices. So the other thing is obviously, let's just look at the S&P. So the S&P is obviously continually been very strong. So we do get some confluence with following the indices as well on Bitcoin. So this has obviously just been going up for months and months now without any significant retracement, and is probably well overdue a sort of decent size retracement, not necessarily all the way back down to here, but even taking out some of this section at the top. Excuse all the crosses. I need to do my FX updates to figure these so fix these charts up for the 3 month results updates on FX, and then I can hide all the crosses and sort of start my analysis. So I was looking for a lower high end on this yesterday, and it didn't. It sort of went up and took out the high, and then obviously it now has had the drop. I mean, the structure is still very strong anyway. And that was only just for observation alert more than anything else. And even now, it's had a decent drop down today, but it hasn't broken structure. But obviously that's what's kind of dragged Bitcoin down today. So Bitcoin is kind of not really acting that independently at the moment from what I see. As it's a lot of the macro strength, or I guess the sideways, even staying in the range, is coming from, or is similar, doesn't mean it's coming from the indices, but is similar to what the indices are doing. And then a lot of the sort of intraday movement is kind of based on dollar strength or weakness. And that's why obviously we're seeing more significant moves and wicking around in New York because of that. Anyway, so I won't spend too much more time on that. Or just incidentally, the gold has obviously taken off 4,000 now, and silver has taken out all-time high at 49 and has wicked up there. So this is kind of interesting. If you wish to look for a short on silver, now would kind of be the time. It's still early days. It's still on daily demand here. So obviously don't just FOMO into a short, because it could just break out like gold does. Gold quite happily breaks through all-time highs, no problem. So it doesn't necessarily mean because this wicks down, it's going to reject. But there is at least now the possibility where it's actually a significant area of resistance for a few to start watching that. Okay, so on to Bitcoin. So the other thing I wanted to talk about here, I guess, is I had this chart is supposed to be for my high time frame analysis, and when we get into ranges, I tend to then end up being lower time frame, and also to try and not to have to always show my low time frame chart, which is this one with way more stuff on it. And as a result, like, it hasn't been as accurate as I would like. And I'll talk about some of these alerts, that I've posted in the channel. I think it all would have been in my last stream as well, even a while ago, because they weren't high probability, and there's the whole point of this chart is it's supposed to be higher time frame and therefore higher probability. And also, again, I want to hide all of this stuff so I can start thinking about it afresh. So I guess from the last stream, so we did get rejections here. So we had a 2-week supply in here. I think I've still got the line for it there. Probably take out, because it has taken out the high now, so I can remove that line. But yeah, so this was a 2-week supply, so I was looking for shorts, coming into this supply in here. We did get those, quite a nice rejection there. However, I got a bit carried away with thinking here we would make a lower low, and knew we were on weekly demand, so the high time frame. So what we can have, so you can make a 2-week supply in range like this, you can short it. But obviously the bigger structure is still, this is the last move up, and this is just a retracement of the last move. And even all of this stuff inside here is just a giant range that's sitting as a flag at the moment on the top of this last up. So obviously the high time frame structure, based on the weekly chart, is still up, or this is a 2-week demand here, and there's a 3-week demand a bit lower. But I think here I got a little bit carried away with wanting this to go down to the 3-week level. And I still want that, actually, and now we have rejected. I think that chance is higher. But as a result, I was then going, okay, so with the 2-week supply, a retest of that level, if it came back, it had gone a bit inside, it could have got a rejection there. Then there was a 3-day supply, I think, in the top here, or 2-day or 3-day. So I was then looking for the possibility of a rejection there. Then I had this area circled, and it wasn't, by the time we got back up here, I actually wasn't that interested. I'm just leaving it there for transparency. When we were over here, I was looking for that test potentially. Like, I think if this had come up higher, if this had come up higher, I was looking at the 120k level, because there were a lot of liquidations in there, and there were a lot of walls. and the walls still existed, I think, when we came back up through here, but obviously the liquidations had changed quite dramatically because we'd had a lot of PA in between. So again, as a result, we ran through, and there was also daily supply in here. So we ran through here, and then I just alerted all-time high just to see if we were going to get that rejection. And you may remember previously I had this this wave marked out with the extension, and I was looking at the 113 to 127 area, which was this lower black box for rejection. But then again, when we'd done the bigger move, I kind of then drew this bigger wave for then looking up for the rejection and then potentially in the 113, which is a little bit higher. So we didn't quite make it up. We went to the lower box, but not the cleanest on both. But there's still the possibility, actually. Like, so this box I'm less concerned with now because it was supposed to be for that rejection, which didn't quite make it either. Just to reiterate, for anybody who doesn't follow me, the 113 is the 113% is the failed wave by Scott Carney's harmonics analysis. And Bitcoin's quite good at, when it's doing a failed wave, of hitting, or has been historically good at hitting the 113 to 127 fib levels. So I tend to just draw the boxes in. On the higher time frames, they sort of seem to, like, we tend to get sort of smaller swing failures, I think, so they seem less likely to hit on the higher time frames. But on the lower time frames can be quite reliable if you're looking for a stop hunt of a zone or like an entry. If there's an area that everybody's longed or an area that everybody's shorted, you can then look at the lower time frames to see if you get that 113 rejection once that high or low has been taken out. So moving on. So yeah, like I say, I want to make this chart back up to higher time frame again, and yeah, that's so with hindsight, I look at why these failed, these short entries, just to be able to, because I always like to understand where I've been wrong as such. And as I said, for me, they were lower time frame anyway, and as a result, they shouldn't be on this chart. But we're still, so firstly, we're still in an uptrend. We had hit weekly demand here. While I wanted it to go lower, it doesn't have to. And we made a higher low here. And I did have an entry or an alert here for the higher low on the retest of that level. So the long side was fine. And then it just took off. With hindsight, I guess so we've obviously come off this weekly demand, we've made a higher low here. So when you make a higher low, what that's telling you is this supply isn't strong. Now, it might still give you a reaction, and I can show you actually on the lower time frame, we've had a very similar reaction today with the similar structure. While it might give you a reaction for a short in there, it doesn't have to, and it's a weak zone. Hence why, again, I shouldn't have had it on this chart as such. And then similarly here, there is supply through here, but when it's such a large zone like this is a daily supply here, and then we have the giant 2 week here, then obviously it can run through the zone. And once something starts running hard through a zone and it gets momentum and gets FOMO and people are thinking it's going to break out and great all-time high, then you're going to, afterwards it became all-time high. But again, I had the initial little rejection off here, but then went and took out the high. Because there isn't really decent supply in here based on how long it's consolidated as well, based on the bigger structure being an uptrend. So yeah, anyway, at least now I can hide all these older entries. So we've had a swing failure of the high, but in the meantime, we've flipped, I'll remove my drawing so you can see, but not flipped actually, so we have made a 3 week demand. It's not great because of this sort of curving structure we've got on it, but so I've got that level in as the 3 week, but I haven't got it alert at the moment. We may make a 2 week demand, but again, this is not, it's not looking great right now, but obviously we've still got a few days till we close the candle. But yeah, need to see if we're going to make a 2 week demand in there, and we did make a weekly demand at that same level anyway. So again, we're still holding this uptrend. We still pushed higher, but we have taken out the high on a swing failure. So there is the possibility now, if selling becomes strong in here, that we're going to go down and take out some of these lows. So it's, again, a slightly awkward situation to be in, because we have, I think there's a 5 day demand in there. So again, there's a lot of chop and a lot of mess. Plus we had this big up move. So while there's a weekly demand, it's unclear as to whether we'd actually bounce off the level. So there's a 3 week demand coming in here, so you can look for a possible entry if it takes out, potentially if it takes out last Friday's low, and look for a swing fair around this level in there, and maybe holding that 12 hour or 8 hour demand just below. The 5-day I probably wouldn't bother looking at, and also we need to look in conjunction here with where the liquidations are, where the walls are, and things like that, which I've had a quick glance at. But you need to assess those when we get a bit lower down, if we get a bit lower down. Then we've got the 61 fib, which is coming in at that weekly level. So that's 115,270. So that's where you would start to look. And then, not historically, but previously, I've had this, if you can just see it in all the colours, I had this possible long alert for entry on this daily demand. There's a 12-hour down below, and then there's the CME gap right at the bottom. And as I've said, and I think I talked about this a lot on this move down here, the challenge becomes, and what we saw here is this just pumps straight through all the supply because it's weak supply. But similarly, when we come down, this is still weak demand. All of this is weak demand because it's only taken out the high on a swing failure, but we're in a bigger uptrend, so it should still be considered because it can continue. Take out some of those drawings, yeah, it becomes hard to know if we're going to just throw a giant red candle down through everything. This swing fail means we should take out that low, if not that low as well. And we're just going to throw a giant red candle through everything, or we're going to get some sort of PA like this where it just bounces on each zone. So you've just got to look at the zones as and when they hit. And that's part of the reason, again, I put these possible short entries in on the way up, because while they may not be the higher time frame preference, they can give you scalps. But as I said, I want to kind of keep this chart now to higher time frame. So what I would say is I've got this alert entry here, but the alert, actually, I've got the alert just above. So this was a 61 fib, I think was a bit lower when I originally set the alert, but you'd be looking for around this area. So I'm looking at 114 to 115 for a provisional bounce. And I'm just conscious that we've got the CME gap at the bottom. And then, as I said, so lower time frame, we've got this little 8-hour demand in here. We had some stops. I don't like it when zones aren't tested. So again, previously I was hoping from here we'd come down into that zone or come down to take out the low. Similarly here, you're hoping for some sort of pullback to let people in, or not to let people in, but for people to get out. And that's when you want to sort of start entering, but it hasn't given. Gave a little pullback here, gave no pullback here, and then gave just bits throughout here, but nothing. On the plus side, even when I had these alerts set, that none of these, I think I was commenting because somebody in my group had tried to short, and I sort of said there was no, I think throughout this whole run, probably since here, there was no actual hourly or 30-minute break of structure the entire way up. So until we get all the way to the top, and it was only here that we started to see 30-minute demands break. So yeah, anyway, so those are the areas that I'm looking if we're going to hold this range. So first area of interest, 114 to 115, and then in the bigger picture, we're conscious that we've taken out the high, and that therefore we could take out this low. And then fib-wise, in the bigger picture, you can go back to my previous videos if you want to see the logic behind these, but really like 93, 94K down to 85K are kind of the bigger picture retracement levels that I would really be more interested in, given what we're doing up here. However, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because we are still in that trend. We're still holding this weekly demand. So what else? So the other challenge that, like I said, that has been what Korea has done. So if you can see, in contrast to the US dollar pair, like Korea is just, for Korea, firstly, didn't retrace. So whereas the US dollar pair bounced here and then retraced all the way back to the start, still made a high low, but up back to the start of this impulse and then went up. Korea obviously didn't retrace at all. And I was hoping at the low, also why I wanted the 3-week demand on Bitcoin a bit below that September low, or the late September low, is because I wanted Korea to come into this area at least. But unfortunately it front run as well, and then similarly just took off. On top of that, it made a monthly demand. The US dollar pair didn't make a monthly demand. Let's show you that quickly. It didn't test it. It just closed slightly above and then immediately took off from it. It's the 3-week it's made is actually at the same level. And that's part of the reason that I'm looking at the weekly demand, like all the daily, weekly, of a little bit lower on US dollar pair is because I would like this to come back down and test the monthly. I'll move that across now. It's hard to judge. In fact, I think the career pair is still significantly higher. I need to go and look at what the premium's like. But like I say, a lot of the reason for this is that the dollar has been weaker, or the dollar was weaker initially and is now strengthening. Let me hold on to get this the right way around. Yeah, so when the dollar is weaker, we then expect the BTC US dollar pair to be stronger, which is, yeah, so that happened, I think, on the way down. And then as the dollar started strengthening, when we had this up move, it meant, and the dollar was strengthening at the same time, it meant we had the BTC Korea pair going significantly higher than the US dollar pair. And maybe there's some Korea influence as well, I don't know. But either way, I would like to see this back down here, and then I potentially would be happier looking for longs on the US dollar pair. But as I said, it doesn't always have to come back to where you want it to. Korea historically mostly does. So what we might see, as I showed you at the beginning, we've got obviously the dollar being quite strong. So either the dollar's just going to keep going, and we'll just see the continued disparity on the between BTC Korea and BTC US dollar, or we'll see the dollar starting to correct some of the gains that it's made over the last few days, and then these will start to align better, and that's quite often what we see happening, and that's normally in consolidation periods. So, but we need the dollar to start correcting first, because at the moment it's not showing any sign of that, and also the euro really isn't at support as yet. Let me just look at the so this is the Korean dollar, the Korean versus dollar premium. So you can see here, so the premium currently is 3,350. So that basically, this chart basically is telling you that the Korea pair, the BTC Korea pair, is trading at a $3,350 premium over the BTC US dollar pair. Like I say, again, because of that disparity in what the dollar's doing. And when we do get this giant premium, like historically we tend to say it's a top signal, when it gets up higher. Excuse my vertical lines, I was trying to map out, I might actually remove them. I think I was trying to map out what happened when there was a bottom as well. So the black ones are when there were tops. And I wanted to see that against what the BTC pairs are. So maybe I'll just show you that quickly. So you can see back here, this is the top in 2021. We had a big spike in the premium, and that was a top signal. Then even here, when we had the second top, or the expanded flat B wave, or expanded flat, I don't know, the extended B wave that we got in late 2021, and this wasn't as much of a premium, but that was when top signal, when we started pushing up, and when we sort of tested the supply as such on this chart. Then we died down. Then again here in February, March 2024, you can see wasn't a top, so it doesn't have to be a top on Bitcoin. Move that up so you can see it, but obviously this was that local top, and then we had, I think, 6 months of sideways from there, and again the premium came back down. Then down again. Over here in December 2024, again we had, so the US dollar, Bitcoin US dollar actually topped when this was at the bottom. That was when we had, I think we had a big drop, and the Korea pair, that was when the Korea pair had that massive wick down randomly and then rapidly pulled back up again. But again, this was it was a bit later. Again, this black line, so when we had the second top there is when the premium then started to drop again. And then similarly here, we haven't had full-on top signals yet. This has just been obviously sideways. But I was looking back at, because I've been making quite a lot of comparisons for this now, compared to back in 2021. And we've taken out the high again, so there is a difference in that. But there's been a lot of similarities with what MicroStrategy is doing, what the US dollar dominance, Bitcoin dominance, etc. have been doing. So I mean, there are arguments for us still being in this March 21 run, and then we're still going to have alt season, which some people are using, versus are we here at this kind of second top and it's just extended out a bit more. And a lot of that was to do also with what BTC Korea was doing. So yeah, anyway, it is possible, it's possible that this is going to have a run here and give us a much clearer top signal. That would be nice. Alternatively, we are in this kind of part where it's retesting supply in here, and we're just going to come back down again now. But anyway, that remains to be seen. As I've said, that off again. We've still got that strength on the career pair, and we're similar on the yen pair actually. But finally, we might see a little bit of it dying off now. And I guess, like, given we've seen this strength on here, I'm slightly off there. It doesn't really matter if it's slightly off, if it's just going to run back through the zone now anyway. So obviously this did make a daily demand. Yesterday it had a 12-hour and then it made a daily. So it's still holding this. It's only very weak. If this does close back below here, then I'll just generally, it will make me more bearish even on the BTC pair. And this, like I say, it does have the possibility of having a significant drop if it wants to retrace the whole pump. Now, if this comes all the way back down to there, then we are looking at the US dollar pair more than likely coming lower because it hasn't pumped as much relatively. But as I said, like we have had some difficulty with this career pair. It didn't test where I wanted it to previously. It doesn't have to test back down here. Perhaps it will just test at all-time high. But I'll look for confluence on those things as and when they happen. And yeah, so that's about it. Then today we're looking likely to make daily supply almost certainly on CME. So I'll probably start looking for shorts again when that daily supply is tested, presuming that happens. CME is similar. It has the 3-week demand and the weekly demand. So I want to be looking for longs in those areas. The other thing we had for confluence, which was really nice, and again for the low, but still challenging to some extent because we got the strong trending that we don't normally get, is US dollar dominance. So I had posted, and I think talked about it in the stream, but also posted in the channel that I think around when we were in this consolidation that I was kind of torn as to thinking, is this sort of an inverse head and shoulders? Are we going to do something like this where we're going to have another wave up? And I said maybe we'll get a wick up into here before potentially dropping all the way down into there. Now, obviously, if that happens, this is going to be a big breakout on Bitcoin. So I still think this is possible. But we're still in a very challenging, and we have for months been in a very challenging, obviously for the better part of March 2024, so a year and a quarter. This chart overarchingly has been in 6-month demand for a long time. So this is a 6-month demand. We had initial bounce off it, rejected in 3-month supply. It's come back down, it's taken out the low, but it's been unable to make a higher high. So at this point, if we were going to be strong, we would have wanted to see that make a higher high, but it didn't. Came back down again, and again it's now testing this level. So we are in this nice little descending triangle here. Now I think, who is it, Volkowski, did some analysis on descending triangles. They are traditionally a bearish pattern, but the analysis he did and back tested various pairs and showed that actually the larger percentage of them, I think 60%, will break up. So we still have that risk, but either way, with any pattern, you should be waiting for the actual break rather than assuming it by drawing. So that's kind of what I'm considering here, that we are in this triangle structure. We are making lower highs, but we're still, this was a lower low, this middle one was a lower low, but now we may potentially have made a higher low. So it's simply just seeing, and a lot of the majors are similar, like they're getting to the end of big triangles, and then it's just hard to judge now which way they're going to go. And every time you think they might break out, they don't. So from a structural perspective, we did have this rejection here off the monthly supply. Like I said, it came down harder than I thought, and this was the other error / counter argument why I had those potential short entries in on Bitcoin, because I thought, that here maybe we would get a bounce here back up to test that high. Similarly, I think there was a 3-day in here, and I thought again we might get a bounce off the top to test into that, but as a result we've ended up coming down. We had a small bounce at the beginning, but then we've come down and just taken out that low immediately. Now the burning question is, are we still in a structure like this, where we've just come deeper and we're going to get some sideways before falling off a cliff like we did here? So similarly, this is a bear flag. It has broken the bear flag? Is this just a bearish retest before we get something like that, which then takes us down, potentially breaking the descending triangle, but into 6 month demand? Remind myself this is a 6 month. Okay, so one of the issues when we have stacked demands like this, so we have a 6 month demand here and a 6 month stacked underneath it, is quite often you'll go back to the lower one. So again, we haven't quite hit the lower one, so there is the possibility of going lower in here. And as I said, that could mean Bitcoin breaking out and making a new high. Some of those drawings again, actually. Lots of undos. Okay. So obviously now we've had a bounce, we're getting some sort of retracement on Bitcoin. And so it's just a sort of indecisive point again. There and there are obviously the two obvious areas that you would look for shorts on this, i.e. looking for longs on Bitcoin, which I think are basically the same as what I've got on the inverse on the Bitcoin chart. It's that daily demand and then the 12-hour below, or filling the CME gap. Having said that, it may not even get that high. It's starting to make some decent structure in here, but it can still just be a bearish retracement for that bigger drop. So yeah, I'm trying to think of, what I would, and the other thing on top of that, so as I've talked about previously, we've got this very nasty, tight 2-week consolidation. So if you look at the 2-week chart, and it looks very similar on all the total market cap charts, a bit less on Bitcoin, but the total market cap charts look quite similar to this, again, in inverse. And I was hoping that we would get more certainty once we got this close over the 2-week. Taken out the 2-week now, I took out, so it closed over this level, which was that 2-week, but then it came back immediately and took out the low. And again, I think that was also, again, the reason why I was hoping for another move up. But we're coming off higher time frame supply. So now, similarly, I'm looking for, are we going to get a close below this low to make a, so we did get a close just below there to make a weekly supply. So I guess overarchingly, this is still bearish. And as we said, Bitcoin is still bullish, but it's still very much in the range and can still very much go either way. So I hope you understand. I hope that's clear anyway, and what sort of the challenges we're experiencing. So I'm trying to think if I should do a little quick summary of that. So a very quick summary on Bitcoin is that we're still obviously in an uptrend. We did have supply in here, which knocked us back down for a retest of that local demand, weekly demand, but then strongly went up and took out the high again. We have swing failed at this point, swing failed all-time high, stop hunted all-time high. So it is possible now we come back lower into that 3-week demand below, taking out the August low. However, again, we have made new demand in the meantime. So provisionally, I'm looking for the prospect of longs in the 114, 115 area. There's some areas above that are lower probability, but if price is going to be aggressive, we might get bounces there. But that would be provisionally where I'm looking, and then being conscious of the risk that we've got the CME gap lower down. And like I say, that if we've stop hunted at the all-time high, then it is possible we stop hunt the low, which created that, which is the August low. So look for your longs at 114, 115. If we make daily supply today, you can look for shorts off that. And then if we do get a bigger drop, I'm looking at 85 to 95k, which is where the 3-month demand is below, with some interim levels. We get too carried away with that. I should probably say the 3-week demand at 105 would be the next level of interest if we're going to play out this range stop hunt and then take out the low. So I would then look for potentially this to come back down into this area. That would be where I'd look for a long. The risk by then is that we're going to potentially have created a lot of supply in the interim. So that's a quick update on Bitcoin. I should also point out, I think that the ETFs, BlackRock is still buying. There has been no, even with this, it's not exactly a big drop when you look at the bigger picture, or that feels like it on the lower time frames. But BlackRock have still been buying throughout this. We've seen a little bit of selling from the others, but not much. And the same with Ether, even with the kind of bigger drop that we're getting on Ether, BlackRock have still been buying. So I have a quick look at Ether. I look at the BTC pair first because So I have been significantly more bearish on Ether, although everybody else seems to be bullish. Partly because, so the BTC pair is slightly different, but so Ether dominance is up, has hit this 6-month supply. So that was one of the reasons that I was more bearish on Ether. Ether BTC, obviously it hasn't gone that high, but it swing failed the monthly supply here. And that's what I was looking at. There was, previously there were all these trend line stops through here. So I was looking at those circles. Drawings back on. So I was looking at this circled area, like initially I was looking at the monthly and ran through there, and then I was looking at taking out those little trend line stops in there, and those circles, and potentially going up into this 3-day, which is where we got the final wick. So I was looking for this drop here. It is a pretty slow drop, which is decent. We come back down through, I think, the 5-day demand, but again, at the moment, still holding this low, which is kind of forming the consolidation. So it could still hold through here, but it's not exactly looking very nice. It also made a weekly supply. So when Bitcoin started running, I kind of said maybe Ether would run a bit later, and we did get that, but it didn't run very much relative to Bitcoin. It didn't manage to get back up into this supply that I wanted. And if this does drop, obviously weekly demand is quite significantly lower. So yeah, that just kind of frames Ether, because I was more bearish on this, and particularly then when it made this 2-week supply. So while Bitcoin did break out and take out all-time high, Ether was also slightly annoying with the entries. But again, it was large zones, and I had commented the same. So I can actually put back the, and so I had hide the drawings again. So we have a weekly supply in here, but obviously it was this giant green candle. We had 2 weekly supply a little bit higher. And then I think we've also got the same as Bitcoin. We had a 3-day inside it, and it still managed to go literally a hair off the top. Didn't quite take out that monthly high, which is where I was really properly looking for a short entry by the end of the run up after many days of running. So yeah, again, this is why I had, so initially I had a more aggressive entry just because it was at the point of breakdown. I was looking for a short when we hit the weekly here. And I think it didn't give much off that at all. Then I was looking at the 2-week level. This is a black cross because I wasn't particularly interested in that level. It was only because it had given very little off that. I kind of thought maybe, again, Ether can be inclined to not revisit when it gets bearish. It can not revisit supply, as we've seen today. And you see, for example, here when it dropped there and it retested, it didn't come back up into this zone until later. So Ether can, when it wants to run, just be slightly annoying. So then we came up into the 3-day, and we did get a sort of a bit of a reaction there, but again, still didn't break any demand before the final push up to, I think I had a 2-hour supply that I had alerted, I talked about previously, and alerted here right at the top, and it like a wick to like, I think a hair below that high. It was slightly challenging. I also was looking for, so I was looking for confluence with CME as well on this. So the CME chart, I left this gap in here, so I did have a gap that was unfilled here. It's also got an unfilled one up here. So I was looking for that gap to be filled. I can delete it now because I'm just showing. But then again, so it did go over. I was looking for the gap fill, then possibly the stop hunt of this level. And then also, the CME didn't actually take out all-time high from 2021. So I then was thinking, when it hung out up here for a while, I was kind of thinking maybe we're going to get another push and take out all-time high here, which is why on the US dollar pair, I was then kind of had alerted around this level, because even if it didn't get back up to take out all-time high on the US dollar pair, I thought was possible CME, it will reject around the area that CME is going to take out all-time high. But unfortunately, we didn't get that final push before dropping. Either way, that final entry was decent after a few false starts on that. I think I had an alert. I had a more aggressive alert. So again, because Ether doesn't like to, or doesn't always come back and retest where you want it to, I had an alert in here for a possible retest around that area. As of yesterday, I didn't get anywhere near that high. It had made a daily supply, but even when it makes a daily supply, let me show you. So it's not the best daily supply anyway. It was 2 candles, but when it makes a daily supply and it's that close to price, it's hard because, it's a huge zone. So, you can short here and have your stop all the way up here. That's fine. But for the way I trade, it's not particularly useful. Like, I don't want to have stops that are that far away. So I would rather wait for it to retrace higher inside. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And in this case, it didn't. And then similarly today, it's been equally annoying. I put a new alert for a possible retest of this zone in here. And even this is a decent sized zone. And I thought, well, it could reject immediately off the start of the zone or go higher inside. But in fact, I had a couple of candles up in New York, but only rejected. I think that's an hourly there. Yeah, it just came off the bottom of this hourly here, and again, didn't really give any significant move up to be able to jump in a short, at least a mid-time short, a mid-time frame short. So again, similar to Bitcoin, I was looking at this. I mean, this is still essentially bearish. Drawings again. Should probably clarify that, not bearish. So same as Bitcoin, this is in the weekly uptrend. It came down, it tested the weekly at this low. And like Bitcoin, I was again guilty of, when we hit this low, of thinking that we were going to get a rejection and come back to that low. And we still might get that, but obviously it's gone significantly higher first. Like I said, the structure is still bullish. This is just messing around, but it's had that instant bounce off weekly demand, so could just keep going. So I'm not bearish on this per se. I was just bearish relative to Bitcoin because of the BTC pair. And then similarly, the other issue that was making me more bearish was looking at Ether dominance and then total DeFi dominance, with being in this sort of similar ballpark. Total DeFi dominance also hit a 6-month supply. So now these things being bearish per se can either mean the money's going to flow into US dollars, or it means the money's going to flow into Bitcoin. But either way, if I wanted a long from a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, maybe even, I've been saying I would rather long Bitcoin and other alts than Ether or DeFi. And that's broadly turned out to be the right thing. Having said that, a lot of other people are super bullish on Ether, so maybe I'm completely wrong. And excuse my chart is also far too messy, so I need to remove some stuff off it. I mean, for me, like, also put simply, like, even if I ignore the dominance issue and those sorts of things, we have swing failed all-time high. So there is still the possibility that we take out the low that created this, which is that low, which would actually be quite nice, because then it will come back into this sort of 3-month demand down here that it's slightly front ran at that cross. So there is this, people get very bullish, and that's fine. But if you're talking from a range trading perspective, taking out the high here could mean taking out the low that created that high and coming deeper into this demand, or it can even mean taking out that low. So be aware of that and don't be overly bullish. And the other thing I always say is, when we're up here, I'm short biased because we're at resistance. If we come back down into here, that's fine. I can be long biased at that circle, which I was. That's where I had my first alert. I can be long biased here, which is where the next alert is. I'm quite happy to be long biased on this new 3 months. So we did make a 3-month demand in here. So I'm quite happy to be long biased here. And then these other entries that I've had that haven't been tested, there's another 3-month or a monthly demand down there. I think that's a monthly demand. Yeah, it's gone through the 3-month. That's it. Take that out. I'm quite happy to be long biased if we come down into demand, but while we're in supply or at resistance, then I'm going to be short biased. So I need to probably think through more the structure on this. So yeah, the short version of this is basically, or the summary on this is still an uptrend based on weekly. We've had one bounce into the weekly. We are making a sort of what could be a bull flag consolidation. So there is the possibility that we're going to run from this. The structure is still up. There is still 3 months demand below. There is 1 month demand below that. Should we get bigger retracements? And then the more immediate would be this 3-week level, 2-week level at 3762. That would be looking for possible long entries on this. We did have a 2-week supply, and we are overarchingly at resistance, at all-time high resistance. So therefore, I'm comfortable looking for short entries as well, and just seeing how things play out and holding things holding or scalping in both directions or taking small swing trades in each direction while we're in a weekly supply like this. So we're in a 2 weekly supply, so we'll see. So in the equivalent situation on this, when Bitcoin, so the difference with Bitcoin and Ether is that Bitcoin had already tested this 2 weekly supply, I think, on it, created and made it and tested it on this August-September high. Ether then created it later, thus is rejecting it, whereas Bitcoin was the second test of it and therefore went back through it. So in this same scenario, Bitcoin came back down here and made a higher low and then ran up. So if we consider the structures to be the same, and watching one play out over the other, then we can look for more immediate long entries. I provisionally had the entry down here at this point when I thought this would test. That was where the CME gap was. That's still actually, that's my more preferred entry now. For a provisional bounce, I've also got 61 fib here because Ether very much likes 61 fibs, and this immediate daily demand. So on from a lower time frame perspective, you can look for a bounce if we come back into this daily zone and around that 61 fib at, what's that, 41.85. Be conscious of the trend line. There's some trend line stops through here and that we might go in. That one will be a preferred entry on this. And then if we're going to follow that same structure as Bitcoin, when this does suddenly get stronger based on this first tap of weekly demand, then maybe this will hold at the 4K mark and then we get that bigger move up. Based on the 2 week supply playing out, then it is still possible we come back down into this level as well. So those are kind of the three main levels I'm looking at for Ether. And at that point in time, I'd also then want to see where the BTC pair is. So if Ether does come down, in a perfect world, the BTC pair will be testing in here. Still got a bigger retracement it can do if it wants to, but in a perfect world, at least I'd want to see this area being tested on the BTC pair. Again, I wanted to do a relatively short stream today, so I'm not going to go into alts loads. I will just have a quick look at the majors because I've been talking about them already. So I put all the updates of those in the Telegram channel. So anyone who's not in my Telegram channel, please feel free to join because I do updates there. Anyone who's watching the vertical stream, I hope you like that I've added in above my head the name of the pair, because I think some people were complaining that it was too hard to see, and I figured out a way that I could put a little box there to display what pair I'm looking at, so it's a bit clearer. So on all the majors, like most of them look quite similar, but a couple of them have a slightly different structures. TRX is obviously one of the different structures, but all of them we had this test kind of mid-September of highs. We had a retracement, and then I was looking for possibility of lower highs here. Now they all vary as to whether they should be giving lower highs there. So we had a bit of a mix, like based on their bigger structures. So we had a bit of a mix, and we also had like sort of some running inside the zone. So TRX here had the 2 week supply, not dissimilar to Ether. I had the original alert go off, and obviously it went a bit higher. I sort of said there was a 2 day and a 3 day supply higher inside. Actually, that was in the alert, so it did go up higher into there. What we then had on the weekend was some of these. Then obviously we had the drop. It was that weekend? Yeah, Friday we had the drop, and then we had the possibility that these were testing on the weekend. And I didn't necessarily think we were ready to make lower lows at that point, but just in the interest of getting some scalps, I kind of thought I'll throw in some entries for the group just so they can get some scalps off there, and then if we did get that bigger drop, then they would be in the trade from that original higher time frame alert that went off. So in the case of TRX, that did give a bit of a reaction, but then came up higher into the zone, so has held that bigger 2 week supply. So let me show you that. So this is really what you're looking for in the bigger picture. So I had a very, very big buyback off that. So that's, a downside of this supply. However, it's still, had a lot of people trapped in there. So again, worth looking for shorts off that. It's, in the bigger picture, it's vastly overextended. It hasn't really had any sort of decent retracement for years, since 2021. had this, obviously this big wick and drop off and sort of blow off top there, and it's retraced quite a lot of that. Now there are areas that it could go to higher in there, and TRX does like to keep grinding. There is a 4-hour up the top here, so there were zones that it could have gone to, and similarly here there's a 12-hour untested, so there are still some things that are a little bit higher. But once you start to see the 2-week supply form like that, then it's worth looking for, maybe you're going to get that bigger drop. TRX has made a 3-month demand down here, so I'm not bearish on this per se, but it would be nice, if we are going to get this test, that we could at least get drops down into here and here perhaps before looking for more up, because it's certainly now it's not at the point. It's been going up, even if I just look at the recent, since this retracement, it's been going up since March. And has 2-week candles down, but it's about time it gave a bigger retracement. So when it's made a 2-week supply, it's about time you start looking for that. So yeah, this is just the monitoring. It's still pretty early days, and still, like everything else, is kind of in a triangle. So we just need to see if this is going to drop off, and that's really going to be driven by if Bitcoin's going to be losing strength at this point. If Bitcoin has swing failed all-time high, then the rest of the alt market is going to be done. A lot of alts we do see are already done, I think the majors are still kind of at the indecision point, and they still are very, very mixed in structure. But yeah, just to do quick updates on these, like I said. So if we get another move up here, I probably wouldn't short again in this supply unless I see something else. If it makes a daily today on, a lot of the majors look like they might make daily supply today, or possibly 2-day in some cases. I think this also might have 2-day on it. Or did I put it in earlier? No, it must be something else. I'll probably start looking for shorts again on this, but it's still tenuous because we're still back in this daily demand. And again, all the majors are pretty much the same on that. They've kind of have come up, and they've got they're in major supply. They've got a lot of them made 2-day or daily supplies, but then they've all got this daily demand below. LTC again has gone a bit different. So LTC did flip so it's a bit more like Bitcoin. It flipped the 3-week by a hair. It closed, you can see it just closed slightly above here. Not, again, something I'm particularly confident of longing there, but then it also made a weekly a little bit lower, and it's still holding that level. So Litecoin I kind of wanted to potentially be a bit bullish on, but again, not dissimilar to Ether. How can I be bullish when we're right at supply? It's hard. But are we at the point on this that this is going to break out and start running up into this monthly? Like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail on the bigger picture on these, but that's the sort of risk on Litecoin. But if you were looking for one of the majors to long, Litecoin would be it, in my opinion. Either it holds here, it's got the weekly level, and it's going to get a run, even if it's up to there, or taking out some of these highs. If it doesn't, if it comes down into here, we've got daily demand, but then also there's a monthly. This also made a 3-month demand, in fact. So the problem I have is a handful of them made 3-month demand. I think Litecoin, Link, and maybe Sol, something else, a third one. That's not a very nice one, but they all tested the level before it was confirmed, which then makes it harder to know if it's going to come back and retest, or if that's just kind of it, it's tested the level. So again, another reason to be bullish on Litecoin is it has already tested this 3-month level. Now, again, it could come back there. If it comes back there, that's possibility for another long, and then obviously deeper down inside, where my preferred entry would be, rather than trading in supply, would be monthly demand inside this bigger 3-month. So I circled this the other day because I was saying I was toying with putting an entry there, but I'm not sure. I might just watch it if it comes back into this area. But at the moment, this is still holding pretty strong. So assuming the whole market isn't going to die, this would be the one I said earlier that I wanted to see this close back up in here, flip this, what's probably going to be a 12-hour supply to 12-hour demand. And then it's also a possibility this could make a 3-day demand, and then I would start looking for longs in it. I'm not going to long right in here. But at the moment, this is holding pretty well. BCH. So BCH is where it gets sort of more similar to the other structures. This was an earlier runner and is one of the stronger ones. It's stronger because it's got all these weekly and 2-weekly demands. However, it's still in annual supply. I think it's a second test. It's taken out that high. That's the downside. And the other risk, and made me nervous, has been nervous for ages on BCH, is all these stops down here. And what we have seen now is the BTC pair has come down quite low actually. I think it's probably back around here. I'm not sure exactly what that means, whether this is going to, as a precursor to this just falling like the BTC pair, or whether the fact the BTC pair has done it, BTC pair will find support somewhere around here, and then this is going to go up together. Not sure. But anyway, I'm still, for the now, similar to Bitcoin and Ether, it's still, while it's a mess, it's still holding an uptrend. So this was one of the few that I actually alerted. I feel like I need to refresh this page because I think this might be an old page. Let me refresh. Hopefully I didn't change anything. It's one of the few I've alerted the daily demand on. And I also alerted the daily demand on Ripple, actually, and Ripple's just gone through it. So, yeah, I wasn't overly confident. It wasn't the refresh page issue. So I think there is now a daily demand. But I think I previously had obviously a 12-hour alerted. Maybe the alerts just moved. It should be there. It's just an error in alert. Anyway, so daily demand here. So yeah, I'm looking for the possibility of a long on there. As of yesterday, I also alerted for shorts on a lot of these daily supplies that have been made. I had, I think, Sol, Doggy, and Atom hit, but the others didn't. So there's things I need to update. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep these. If we make a new daily supply, I might put in a more aggressive one. I need to think about them now. They haven't tested at the time I wanted them to test, because there's always a timing thing. So yeah, BCH just playing around in this range at the moment. I'm looking to see if it's going to make a higher low in here. If it starts breaking down here, then I'll much more aggressively start looking for shorts on this. Ripple. So Ripple, like I said, one of the things I'm concerned with is whether this is a precursor, whether the BTC pair is a precursor to the drop. So if you look at the BTC pair, firstly, it didn't. I think the US dollar pair made a higher high here, which this didn't. Secondly, it had this same sort of descending triangle and has now obviously fallen off a bit of a cliff on that. The US dollar pair is still holding. So yeah, it's made that higher high and is obviously still holding this range, but I'm not sure if the BTC pair is a precursor to this drop. So I would say be very careful on this right now if you're looking for longs on this. You know, we've had 3 hits on this demand. We've come off, we had a 2-week supply, which is rejected. Which is, I think I actually didn't have, I was paying for some reason, just because Ripple can be a bit funny, and it had untested zones. We can sometimes get a kind of a blow off Ripple top, and we actually had that a bit here. So I hadn't had this 3-day alerted, and then we did have that kind of blow off top there, but then it still held below. And I say blow off top, obviously it's not a blow off top on this time frame, but the point is it had this run when the rest of the market was doing nothing. And then it came down, but it still held this zone. So we're now back for the 4th time in this zone. So this is not somewhere I really wanted long. If we were going to make a higher low, I wanted, to see the aggression coming off there, but we haven't. It's just run back through. It had a small bounce off there. Had similarly the short in that daily supply for continuation of the triangle, but I didn't get back up high enough to test it, sadly. This, I hadn't alerted the 3-day though, so we've got the bigger 2-week. And I hadn't alerted the 2-week aggressively because we'd already hit that 3-day inside it. So again, because we already hit the 3-day, I didn't alert the 3-day again. But then when we rejected higher in this 3-day, I did put in an alert for short in there. So that's obviously worked out pretty nicely. So some of the shorts, so as we saw on TRX, we had that test, but then it made a higher low here and then came up and took out the high. In the case of Ripple and a few of them, they didn't, and a few did. So in the case of Ripple, you would still be in that trade if you'd taken that short entry up there. There is a possibility of a long here at 2.75 if you want to watch it. Not something I'm interested in because of those multiple tests on support there. Right. Why are my majors in the wrong order? I think I've had some things closed, that's why. Okay, give me a sec while I open up the BNB chart. So obviously BNB's just been on mission. Where are we? Majors. And BNB's a bit on a mission. I need to show you the BTC pair on BNB because I was looking for the prospect of a triangle that it was still in 6 monthly supply or monthly supply, and I was looking at the prospect of a triangle, but then it went up to make up the channel, which was the other thing I talked about being a possibility. So I need to kind of show you that. If the chart ever loads, give me a moment. These messages. Maybe I'll just do the second set of majors while that loads. Okay, so Solana's been playing really nicely, actually. So if you followed me previously, I think I was, yeah, so there was a 3-day demand and then a weekly demand. And I think we sort of got a small bounce off the 3-day and then deeper in the weekly, it came all the way to the bottom. I had this alert set because we had a 2-month level here and in fact bounced just above and it's now a 3-month level. So I did reset the alert for that low, but it took back off before I could get any re-entry on that. Then, so this is, yeah, one of the few again that I put a more aggressive long entry on. I'm trying to remember now, I'm not sure if I still want that there. I think some of them I got slightly front run where I was looking for long re-entries. I mean, BCH got slightly front run, didn't get the long re-entry there. So I don't know if I still want this one here or not. Either way, Solana, so I want to be more bullish on this because it made that 3-month demand. So I want to see the test on that level again. I do want it as a swing failure this time if it gets there, because obviously it made that low there. So a swing failure will be nice and easy. It's an easy invalidation that if it goes below that low, closes back above, great. It's still in that sort of challenging point, though, that it's coming off supply up here. You know, so it's had this drop, it's had this retrace, and it's how much are we going to retrace here? You know, are we ready? And we've already had a fairly decent drop off there. Are we just going to triangle through here before we move up? Or are we now due for a C wave, which can be anywhere from triangle in through here or drop down for a zigzag? I'd like to think it won't zigzag because it's made the 3-month demand. But there are a lot of, I can see when I have a lot of crosses left behind, there's a lot of zones below that haven't been tested. But anyway, that's much that we're just looking at. These I look more at, not scalps, but sort of mini swings on these rather than necessarily holding them for like new all-time highs and things. And we can look at those, like for example, when we came back down in here, we've had a long entry, we certainly had a long entry on that monthly zone. So if you're an investor, there are monthly zones that you can hold for a test like this in the hope that we're going to make an all-time high if you're happy holding it for like a year, 2 years, 3 years. I am not that person, unfortunately, so I'm looking at the smaller time frames. So again, if you're an investor, you're looking, what's that, 188, and that would be the sort of perfect world aggressive bounce on 188 for you're an investment holder, but 3-month zone is huge, so just be conscious it can come down and it needs to hold something at 96, but it could still half in price from there and still be bullish in inverted commas. So the more aggressive entry, I've got an alert here. If I'm a bit tentative now. I'm wondering actually if I should remove that. I feel like this might be too aggressive, but I'll leave it there because maybe you'll get a scalp off it. Either way, so on the short side, the last updates I did in the channel were we had 3-day supply here, big zone there. That was the first alert that went. We started to have a reaction off there. Like the others, like I said, that there was a 12-hour supply in here. This and Doggy were the two that I actually said they might run through because they hadn't quite tested this daily zone above. There was, I think Doggy had a 3-day above it. It rejected in a daily and had the 3-day above. So I was sort of saying maybe that they could go through and retest higher. It actually didn't quite get to that level, or the alert went off. So it did eventually take out that, but held the original bigger picture 3-day zone. Then got a bigger drop down. Then we got the retest on this yesterday, and retest on daily supply was one of the more aggressive ones I put in, now getting a drop. So just look for the reaction here when we start come back down into this daily zone. I'm going to delete that. I don't. It becomes the difficulty we have, same with Bitcoin, is that we've got daily demand immediately there, and we've got an 8-hour here, we've got another 8-hour here, we've got this low that we haven't taken out, and the lower high in the bigger picture. So it becomes, if there are too many zones, then it becomes too awkward. Like really you want to look at the bottom zone or the most aggressive one. So this is still retaining the daily uptrend. So that would be the kind of provisional one. If it starts to come down deeper in there, it can still bounce, but then it's starting to kind of potentially break structure. If we're looking at this as the daily structure, if it breaks that low, then it's starting to break structure, and then you're looking more confidently for shorts. Similar to all the others, this may create a daily supply at that level. So I might start looking, why is that not? Okay. So again, there's a prospect of putting new short entries in on this as well. So I need to have a little bit of a think about this. Try and think of somewhere else I can compare for you. Not anywhere really that I want to massively compare. But I suppose it's not dissimilar to here. So one of the other things I was looking at, this was 61 February tracement. I think it was on this I was looking at. Yeah, and then so that was why I was looking here, and that was the 61 February tracement. But this is, I mean, this obviously has just bounced off there and gone straight up for a new high. So it is possible that we're still going to hold that bigger uptrend here. But if you've got supply in there, like we have up here, then you're potentially going to get that secondary tracement. So while this has already hit the 61 fib and that didn't hit it till there, slightly different, we are looking at, are we at the same point in structure here? We've had one drop, we've got a retracement, and then we're going to get a secondary drop. So is this that secondary drop coming in there? Like I said, the fibs are different, but they don't have to be the same anyway. And in fact, I've only fibbed from the bottom of there, so let me have a look quickly. If I fib this whole up move from that last low, yeah, the 61 fib will be here. So it could become closer to this entry. My preferred entry would be down here, 168, because that takes out a lot more of these trend line stops. Anyway, yeah, just sort of highlighting here that the entries I've had have done quite well on that. On to dot. I was more bearish on. It's still in this 3-month supply. Of course it can break out, of course it can go up. Like some of these are a bit hard because they have this slow grind, similar with BCH. You know, you have this slow grinds up, and in some cases then you start thinking, oh, it's going to fall off the trend line, but in some cases you'll suddenly get a moon from there. So I do start to find them quite awkward when they grind for too long, because then you start going, you know, all the demands are all already used, and the same here, you know, they're already tested multiple times. We've now got a lower high. So is this now finally, okay, giving up the ghost off that 3-month, and we're just going to see that drop coming off here? Or are we still in a similar structure to here, where we're just making another triangle, make another triangle through here before it runs up? And I know we're at the point when all of these that I don't want to preempt them. If I see new supply and new demand made, then I want to be trading them, but I don't really want to trade at old. So on that basis, I didn't put an alert here. So this has come down, you can see, into the daily demand, similar to what I was just looking at on Sol, which hasn't made it there yet. So some of the majors have dropped into daily demand. Some dropped into them yesterday, some of them dropped into them today, and some of them haven't hit yet. So I'd rather see them all hit, and therefore the ones which have hit are probably going to go through them, which we'll see in a minute with Atom, which has gone through. And it's the weakest of all the majors. And as I said in the last stream, I want to kind of take it off the majors. I do have an alert down here if it does take out all these lows, because there is a daily zone there that hasn't been tested, but also it's got trend line stops through there as well. So this was one. So the short side, I had an alert on I hadn't gone aggressive on this. There was a 3-day supply and 12-hour inside it, so that was a provisional alert there. For some reason I've deleted the box off it, so that should be there. I didn't have a re-entry alert because I didn't like the structure of it. It did go up and take out that original high, but held the 12-hour zone for the bigger drop. Then yesterday I had an alert for 4-hour inside it, but it didn't get quite back up there for a retest for a short entry on that. But the bigger picture short has worked okay. And now back down in this daily demand with the triangle indecision going on. Near was a little bit more like Litecoin. This was the other one that I was going to be, but if I was going to be bullish on any of them, it was going to be this. It made a monthly demand. So it was, I think Sol, Link, and LTC made a 3-month demand, and then NEAR made a monthly demand. The others, I think, all tested before it was confirmed. NEAR didn't test it. It was very close to testing it, but also before it was confirmed. So in my last update, I think I said I was looking for ideally, but this is just perfect world, and my perfect world doesn't necessarily have to happen for this to retrace up here and then come back down and test that level. And still in the perfect world, I would like that. This did run through. I think I was originally, my alert was for daily supply, and it just gave some wicking off here, but then wicked up into the daily supply above before dropping down. In the meantime, it also made this 5-day demand. Not a very nice one. It just closed very slightly above, but just purely because it had that, I just said I'm not going to look for shorts on this because all the other majors are going to be better on the short side. Having said that, it's now going to make a daily. It's made a daily supply, and it's probably going to make another one today. So, but still similar to the others, they have this daily demand in here. So I'm unsure if we're going to hold this and run back through it. So I think all of these I need to see a little bit more on Bitcoin, and I just want to see some of these ranges break. Or we wait for something different, or we wait for the bigger move. So if this does drop down into monthly demand, then I'll be much more comfortable. I had this alert here anyway for the 3-day inside this monthly, or is inside the 2-week as well. I'm just looking quickly. Yeah, so this is still also in a 2-week demand. And I think, there was an entry here that I had for 3-day and then 2-week, and then it just dropped lower inside the 2-week, but just didn't quite get to where I wanted it to. So it's still like this would still be nice if it came back down, bounce here, come back down into that zone, and then I'd be much more confident looking for longs on this. And I do think, this is one of the ones I like. I think I like the BTC pair as well. Or it has space, at least, on the BTC pair. So assuming the whole market isn't going to dump, and we are still in a bigger range. The only difficulty with this, I guess, is that this is weekly supply, and it's all just a big consolidation underneath this weekly supply. But once you start to make these higher time frame demands come in, then you start thinking maybe that supply is eventually going to break. It's just taking its sweet time. And plus, this is one of the few that hasn't tested the 2-month zone up here. And so we can see a little bit more of what happens on that. And I need to go back up to the higher time frames, I think, on some of these, because they're just becoming so choppy and messy. Then finally on these we have Atom. So I said in the last stream that I want to get rid of Atom because I don't think it's even remotely a major anymore, but also the point of me looking at the majors is to get confidence on where I think BTC is going to go, or when I think BTC is going to make the bigger moves. And if they start doing their own thing and not one or two of them can do their own thing for temporary periods of time, but if they start entirely doing their own thing, then they're not no use to me over any other alt anyway, and they might as well just be an independent alt. So Atom, I've kind of said, has started to be a little bit awkward, and the Atom BTC pair is hideous, and I think partly it's awkward because it's one of the only majors that hasn't come down and actually hit this demand. Like at least Dot one, it's fighting the 3-month supply as well, which this is actually fighting, same the 3-month supply in here. At least Dot's hit demand, so I can think it might follow the others, whereas this for months and months, or back since September 2024, like I would have wanted this zone to get hit, and obviously it went up before that, but I'm still wanting this to get hit. And I just want another major that isn't Atom because it annoys me. And also it just hasn't been that easy to trade in here. It's not clean at all. Having said that, it's been better over the last few days. So this was one of the ones that never came back up to test the weekly supply that I wanted it to. Again, all the other majors got back up here. This didn't because it's so weak relatively. Did have 5-day supply, which I actually only noticed earlier today. I put a short entry for 12-hour supply in there, dropped down, and then I had an alert, 2 alerts actually yesterday. I had a daily supply, but I said that in the alert that it might be too aggressive and that maybe we should wait for the 4-hour up here. And again, nice rejections yesterday for shorts. Then I just want it to be all the way down at $3 before I actually start to look for bigger longs on this, or it needs to do something different. So that's those majors, and so the BTC pairs is kind of what's really critical of looking at these. And I think NEAR is the only one that I actually really like. And even sold BTC isn't great, but I need to have a look back at that. And then finally, in an effort to keep this stream below to an hour and a half, I'll just quickly look at BNB, Link, ADA, and Doggy. So obviously BNB's just been on a tear. I do need to show you the BTC on this first, actually. Hi, Leaf Like. Just noticed somebody said hi to me. Oh, it was only a minute ago. I wasn't too slow on noticing that. Hi, how you doing? Okay, BNB BTC pair. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so BNB BTC, last time I talked about it, there was the prospect of us rejecting here, making a triangle. And that's why I had the alert in there. This was a monthly supply, I believe. Just check that. It's not a best, yeah, with monthly, or actually maybe the 3 monthly. No, I lied, just a monthly. But yeah, so we had the prospect of a rejection in here to make a triangle and then potentially get a drop down to where I slightly front run my entry there, or even at least just a drop down into the new monthly demand here. No temperamental mouse. That's kind of what I was looking for on this, either to get a drop down there or a drop down all the way down to the bottom. Or I've said there was the prospect of this breaking through and going up to make this channel. As you can see, I've got drawn in, and up to this 6 month supply up here that hadn't been tested. Now there's a lot of chop through here again, like ways it can go higher in the zone if it wanted to, but I had that alert set there to look for a potential top on the US dollar pair. So at this point, I had started looking for short entries already. So that was, yeah, a few days ago. When was that? End of mid-September. But now, again, worth looking for short entries, hit 6 month, and then there's 1 month inside it. Could run higher. It does have these trendline stops up here, but they're not really on a BTC pair with trendline stops above are fairly irrelevant. The reason trendline stops above are useful is on the US dollar pair, because that would be then you're looking for short squeezes through all the stops. Though this might have to take profits, but then it's not going to have stop losses above. So there's no real reason for it to run and take out a trend line. All it says also is just that it's a bit less clear potentially where resistance may be, because there's too many lines, too many zones. But as you can see, this has already had some sort of a rejection off there. So thus finally, so we've got again heaps of zones on this that just haven't been tested. It just ran up, did make a 3 month demand down here. So this would be the area of interest if we're going to get some sort of a big drop across the whole market. We're looking at the $700 or below mark would be where I would look for the possibility of looking for longs. And I think there's a 3 month in there also, a bit lower. That might be a news if that 3 months been tested. Yeah, so that 3 month already got tested, but yeah, I'd be looking at the top of this 3 month around 700 to start looking for longs if we get a big drop on this. Yeah, so anyway, I've talked about like looking for the old aggressive short entry on this. Some of them have just been with hindsight stupid. Some of them are just worth a try. I think this one I thought was worth a try because that was the BTC pair was at that monthly resistance, and then obviously it just broke out. Similarly here, I'm not sure there. I think it was just I think the rest, yeah, this was the point last weekend when the rest of the market was making those lower highs. And again, I kind of thought, well, it's worth a try. You know, even if you just get a scalp down to here, then that's great. I'm absolutely fine with that entry, even though ultimately it didn't work, because at least it gave a scalp down to local demand. Once you see local demand hold, then either you flip long or you just get out of the trade, take profit. Now we have had finally a bit of a distribution and a bigger drop on this. I threw in an alert again for 12-hour supply. If we get back up there, 8-hour, 12-hour supply in there, if we get back up there and test that area. Don't love it. Would have been nice if this had tested earlier. I don't love it coming to demand first, but I'm happy to alert it. Like, none of these entries should be taken blindly. I think I should just say that. Anybody who's new to watching me, none of these entries, these alerts that I give should be taken blindly. You can see some of them just don't work. And some of them work for shorter periods of time, some of them work for big moves. Each time, like I'm putting an alert, it's for my own personal reason, like it might be an aggressive alert. In the group, I say generally if it's an aggressive entry or not. But some of them are aggressive if they're very counter trend. Like when you're looking for a big trend reversal, I would much prefer to have an 8 or 12 hour, but occasionally I'll throw one in on a 2 hour or something, just to see what happens, just to see if you get the reaction, even just to monitor it. But it doesn't necessarily mean you should be holding it, like, if this goes off, it doesn't mean you should be holding it till it goes to 0. You're, in this case, like if we do get a retracement here, potentially you're just holding it down to see what the reaction is in here. Then maybe we'll get a lower high, or maybe this will start making a high. So it's variable. But if we do get a retest up there, I think it's worth looking for a short entry. Now I look at this lower time frame, there are trend line stops. So trend line. So just watch out for the trend line stops if it does come up there. I think Ripple might have done something similar and not cared about the trend line above. Got a feeling that the previous high Ripple did something similar to this. But I have to go back and check. Daily demand in here, if it comes back and tests it here, there's just the most immediate demand to look for a potential bounce. But be conscious, like sometimes when price is going to come down, taking out the first demand can be quite a common thing it does, and you can see this sort of similar here, that it had a daily demand and it did bounce on it, in fact, a couple of times, and then actually I think it took it out on a wick, then came back through it and then went back down to the lower one. So there is the possibility that this does get run through in favor of the lower one, but we'll see what happens when we get the bounce on that, or when we get the alert for that. Link, I know the BTC pair is in 6-month supply, so again have been more bearish on this, but as I said, it has made a new 3-month demand. We got that test on it again before it confirmed, 25th of September, and we haven't tested into this weekly or 2-weekly demand below. So similar to, I think, what I showed, it's just these structures are just awkward. I should really show the others chart again to show you why I think they're awkward, because they are in these channels, and it's hard to know, like I said, are we going to get this run sideways push and push up out of this channel, or is this just a bearish retest or a bigger drop? And I'd like to think that's not the case, because we are starting to make these bigger demands. Level there. In the case of some of these, like I think the Link is one of them. If I zoom out and show you the bigger picture, it did by a hair made an annual demand, so it could just push up off this annual demand and have a big up move from here. But there's pros and cons, and there's various things I don't like. I can see here that this zone hasn't been tested. That was would have been where I wanted this bounce. In fact, was where I wanted this bounce at the low. And we had that wick down, it came into this 3-day, but didn't quite test the monthly. So is this is an uptrend, sure, but are we going to get a C wave down into here? I still think that is a possibility in the bigger picture. But then also I trade supply and demand above everything else. So if we have made, it's interesting actually. So sorry, I just noticed that this 3-month was a 2-month, and it has actually tested that 2-month. So that wick that it had into that zone on the 25th of September actually tested it when it was a 2-month, so similar to Sol. Yeah, so again, it's hard to judge. I'm finding these hard to judge because of the different structures that we've got going on. That's why for a while now I've just been like trade level to level. On the flip side, this has obviously been quite nice on shorts. So we didn't hit the level I wanted for a long at the lows, but that obviously did hit the 2-month level. This one was a stupid entry. I think I talked about that before anyway. Nice shorts from up there, and then made this weekly supply. So looking for shorts coming into the weekly supply, and 2-week insided, I think. Yeah. So 2-weekly supply, got another push up to take out. So this was one of the ones, again, I didn't put in the entry at the start of the weekend for the lower high, because it was close to hitting this daily demand. Came back up, came into the 3-day supply in here, and then also didn't get my retest entry there yesterday. But but it's still a bit of a choppy sideways thing going on here. So I want to see a little bit more on that. But yeah, if we get the drop, then you're looking around $19 for the re-entry. And finally, we've got Doggy and ADA. So Doggy, there was no new monthly demand or anything on this. So what we had on Doggy, similar to Sol, we had these monthly demands that were hit down here. And just exactly as I just described on a link, the challenge we've got is exactly the same here, that we've had this big up move, we've had a retracement, we do have annual demand here, so it's a strong, obviously a strong zone, but can go deeper in the zone. In fact, came down into the 2 month inside that, but it's really kind of a fairly nasty corrective move up at the moment. So I still just feel like we're going to get some sort of a drop off this trend line, and they're leaving stops below, etc. But then, also equally possible, we get this consolidation that then breaks out. But I can say at least what I see on this is that we don't have the impulses that we've had previously. So even here was stronger than what we're seeing mostly here. Then we had strong impulse, then we had strong impulse. And here we're getting some smaller impulses, and not dissimilar, I guess, to this first one. But they're just not getting very high. I think by now, if this was going to be our major low, we would have seen, even if it was here, we would have seen that bigger move off it. Now, I could be wrong, who knows? But at the moment, I'm just not seeing the strength on this that I want to. And then similarly, we also had the BTC power on this is also in 6 months supply. So the only thing with this was the fact it hasn't hit the monthly up here. So in a perfect world, this would have hit the monthly, and then I'd be more inclined to be more bearish. So are we going to get another move? Possibly we get another move up to take that monthly first, and do a bit more in this triangle rising wedge thing we've got going on. But anyway, so I had entries for the weekly demand here, went a bit lower into the 3 day inside it, so we had decent longs there. In the event that we got front run here, I think my alert had actually gone on this wick, but it obviously didn't quite make the level, and it just took out that high there. That's because we had a similar move here where we just took out the high and then dropped. I thought it was worth looking for a short on the retest of 12-hour supply up here, so we did get a nice short there, and then the short entry is just for the lower high. So as I talked about already, the alert again went for this 3 day supply, but it didn't quite hit it. So I had the aggressive alert for this 12-hour in here, but it went up through it. And I said, we might go up and take out the high into this 3 day above. Sorry, I'm trying to move that across, but in the wrong there. So yeah, we did get up there, and then similarly, and then yesterday we did hit this entry for a short. So I've had a couple of shorts on the retest on that, but still dropping pretty weakly compared to some of the others. Dropping weekly versus holding strongly compared to some of the others. But anyway, yeah, something I'm still not really inclined to trade. Again, we've got daily demand here. If you want to take that, then feel free. We've got a monthly supply up there, should it get back up there. But what I want to see now on these, if I'm going to take bigger shorts, like it's one thing to get entries here, but I now need to see if this is going to triangle or if this is going to break down. If it breaks down, then I will start looking more aggressively for shorts after that happens. But I need to see structure break first. So from a structural perspective, we have this as the low, and then we have that's the high. I mean, really that needs to break. But even at this, if this breaks, I'll start potentially looking for more aggressive longs, or if we get 3 day, 5 day supplies above. At the moment, we're still only making dailies. And we're still holding weekly demand in here. But yeah, I can't say I like the structure of this very much at all. And then finally, ADA. We got 1 hour, 33 minutes. So ADA, similar to Doggy and Sol, we've got the bounce here off the monthly demand. And then I think I just haven't really liked the structure of this for a while, so I haven't put a great deal on this. It came back, so we had a bounce here originally on this 2 day demand, then we had this other 2 day demand lower. This is quite a nice example actually, or maybe it's a daily. This is quite a nice example again when you expect, so something like this, you expect, that's the next one. You expect the dip to be deeper than this. This is quite an aggressive long entry in there. But when you've got multiple zones like this and you're going, which one do I use? This is why I have the more aggressive ones, because then you may get a move up and then it comes back down into your preferred long entry zone. And then you're getting a move back up and then there's what new supply is there. And then maybe this is going to come down into another long entry zone. And once it's done 2 or 3 times, then you're starting to get slightly wary that maybe it's just unable to break out. So this is, again, a more challenging one, because is this, coming off monthly demand? We did have a decent move off monthly demand, but really by 1, 2, 3, I'd kind of wanted this to break through, and it hasn't. So anyway, I had alerts here for shorts on 3-day supply. I think it was a 3-day, and then there's a daily inside it there. What I actually did, so yeah, the 3-day originally got hit, then it just sort of wicked around and wicked a bit higher and then dropped. Then I had an alert for the new 12-hour that was made, when it was a little bit higher inside it, but held, and again tried again and held again. So this was kind of a nice weekend entry that has held the entire time, but you would have had to have some patience while it went quite high in the zone. And then this is another one from yesterday, 4-hour supply there that just didn't get tested. So like I said, I probably should remove all of these now. So all these local ones, just be slightly wary of. If we come back up there, you can watch them if you want. This is another example of, we've hit the daily demand in here. It did have an initial bounce, but straight up into supply and now dropped lower. So as I said, all of these, well, not all of them, BNB is obviously different, but Doggy, for example, it's got that daily demand in there. So Ada's hit the daily, Doggy hasn't hit the daily. Link hit the daily early and got a higher high from it, but has now come down deeper inside it. From a daily perspective, Dot's now hit it, Sol hasn't yet, Near's close to hitting it, but not quite, and Atom's gone through it. But Atom we expected to, because it's so weak in structure. And then finally on these majors, the old majors, yeah, Litecoin holding much higher, not even anywhere near it. Ripple's gone through it. BCH still heading down that way, and TRX is on it. So you can see that they've all got the same daily demand, but if they don't all hit together, then normally the market isn't ready to do a decent bounce. A lot of these depend on timing. And that's why I look at these holistically and to see whether the market's all going to move together. Anyway, I think that's it on the what I want to do today, and on the majors as well. Need to get back to doing alts. I've had a Jesus load of alerts come through, and some are working, some are not working. That's one actually to keep an eye on for today. This is a retest of the annual demand level, and there's a 3-day just inside here that I've had alerted. So this had a kind of strong bounce off 3 months, didn't really bounce that much off the annual initially, strong bounce off 3 months. So this is essentially the retest of that. I don't like that it made 2 months supply in between. What I do like is that it has this trend line stops thing going on. And I can just show you why I like trend line stops, because this is quite a nice example. So Team's a bit of a stronger structure and less history than FET, but this is what we like to see when the supply has all been tested all the way down. That I had an alert here for monthly demand, and it was slightly front run, so I reset it. So when it came back into this zone, it just took off, and it ran through all those stops. So FET again. Doesn't have to, it's a different structure. You should still wait for a decent zone to look for longs, and you should still wait for a proper entry on longs. But that is a possibility of what can happen if you hit a decent zone when you've left all the stops above and when you've got all the supply that's already been tested all the way down. So if that's something worth keeping an eye on. I finally got my TikTok back. Hi, memorable grit, and then bye, because I think you left straight away. I got my TikTok back after 6 months of fighting them in European Commission Court. Well, not in court, but in via lawyers. I'm allowed to do live streams on there now. So what I was actually thinking of doing, because I need to do a live stream, or they'll take my ability away if I don't actually do any. What I was thinking I might do is an alt live stream and go over some of the major alts, so like Fartcoin and Sui and Pengu and the ones that kind of people are interested in. But I will probably do that tomorrow because it's kind of late now. But anyway, yes, I hope this is a useful stream for you. I haven't had as many people watching as normal, so I haven't really had any questions. But I will post the video, and then please, yeah, if you watch the video and you get to the end of the video and you listen to these comments, then please feel free to hit me up in the channel if you want me to include any alts in a stream, if I do a stream on those tomorrow. Yeah, and then I can clean up all these charts. Like I said, I'll start making this back into a high time frame so I can focus on lower time frame entries for Bitcoin. So like nice short there yesterday, slightly front run short there the day before, the swing failed at the high, a couple of failed ones through there, or one that gave us sort of scalps, etc. So I want to be doing those entries on the lower time frame chart, and then make this like really what my macro view is. Yeah, so I think that's it for the day. I hope that's useful. Please like and subscribe if you're interested to show support, and then I can do more. And please let me know if you've got any questions or if you've got anything you want me to cover in a follow-up stream. So have a good evening. Bye.